Okay, let's start. So I will draw the number at the end of class. I don't think any of these are particularly harder than the others, so I don't think it really matters how much which one. This is probably easier than the last one, like I'm thinking now. 10 of these. So I expect the rest will be along the lines of this one, sort of over exactly what we're covering in class, just to make you review your notes and keep you on track. It's just a way to make you go back, and even with stuff I just covered in class, like this one was, it's a way, as far as I'm concerned, to make you go back and keep up with the material. So that's really what I wanted the homeworks to be. The second one really wasn't. And so this is much better. It's exactly the main things that I want you to understand from the material that we just came through. So that's what I'll try to do in the future. I'm going to go back over some of the things we did at the end of the class, even some of the things that were in the homework, because I just want to make sure that we've got that part down before we go on, so to understand where we are, where we're headed, all those sorts of things. And so I'm going to rederive the aggregate supply curve just to make sure we've got it. Then we'll get the aggregate demand curve in place. Then we'll have a model finally that we can use to sort of analyze real-world things. We'll have a fairly complete model. The one thing we won't have at that point is growth theory, but we'll come to that in the last few weeks of the class. But we'll have something we can use to explain the Great Recession and all sorts of other good stuff. So what we were doing, so we did the IS and LM, the goods market, and the money market, and that's the demand side of the economy. So we've got the demand side built. We haven't really done the aggregate demand curve yet. We'll get there later today. And now we're just taking a step to the other side and building the supply curve. Where we're going to start building the supply curve is in two places, the labor market and the production function. What the labor market gives us is the quantity of labor. Then we just plug that quantity of labor into the production function and we get output. So those two things together give us a supply of goods and services. So we have this model where we say, well, we're just going to have Y equals N actually, where N is the number of workers, is our simple production function. It could be more complicated, Y is some function of N. But the point is that all that production function does is turn labor into output. So what we'll use the labor market for, and the book isn't very clear about this, but basically the price setting and wage setting equations, we're working out the labor market equilibrium. I would prefer to do this with labor demand, labor supply curves, because it's easy to move between these two specifications. But that's really what we're doing. And so our labor market gives us unemployment. We turn unemployment into an L, amount of labor. We just plug it in a production function, and then we can get the supply and output. Then all we want to do is take the labor market and say, well, gee, how does N, the number of people working, vary with the price level in our model? And it's going to depend upon whether the medium run, the short run, exactly where we are. But exactly what's the relationship between P and N, the number of people working. Then we've got the supply curve, how P and Y are related, which is what we want. So what we started with, this is really on the labor supply curve, is where this curve comes from. So we've been working with an equation like this. This is minus and plus. If you want to sort of think of this as the labor supply curve, that's kind of what it is, but it's specified in terms of the unemployment rate, which makes it a little bit different. This is just one part of the labor market that we're looking at. And this price expectation was because workers don't know the price level in advance. So when they're negotiating their wage, this is the wage setting equation, it has to be based upon the expected price level. And then it depends upon the unemployment rate and all these other factors that give us the negotiating power of workers in the labor market, because that's going to determine the wage outcome. So we have this price and these things that indicate the negotiating power. Then we had another equation, P equals 1 plus M times W. This was just the marginal cost because there's only one factor of production labor. So W is the cost of one more unit, that's the marginal cost. M stands for markup, so this is just the markup over marginal cost. This is really the labor demand, if you want to think of it, side of it. So we can put these together for a fixed PE and a fixed P, because those are determined at the aggregate level. So the labor market, individual laborers would sort of take these things as given. So we're going to take P and PE as given, and just figure out what the wage outcome is.
And now, once we know wage, we'll know U, so we can use this to get W and U. Once we know U, we know E, or N, the number of employed. Are we using N for the number of employed? Yeah. Yes. And then once we know N, we know Y, because N equals Y in this model. So N, the ratio between N and Y is critical. N goes back. So we said, okay, we can do this graphically. What I'll do is I'll just take this equation and write W equals P over 1 plus M. I'll take a fixed P and a fixed expectation, fixed M, fixed Z, and then I can look at how U and W are related. So all we have is this price is going to be fixed, M will be fixed. The only thing we have varying here is W and U. So we can use these equations to see how W and U, what the equilibrium is for W and U. Everything else is given from the outside. So we just graph this thing. It's a horizontal line at P0 over 1 plus M0. This we said is negatively related to the wage, so there's a negative relation here for a fixed Z and fixed PE. So this is the other equation, P0E F of U and Z. And then where those intersect give us the unemployment rate, and that's the natural rate of unemployment in the long run. It's, if the price expectation is correct, that's the natural rate. If the price expectation is not correct, then you can be away from the natural rate of unemployment. So this is our basic model. The very first time we did it, we assumed that P0E equals P0. And we're treating that as a medium run. So when P0E equals P0, you're in the medium run. And you're at the natural rate of unemployment. When those things are not necessarily equal, then you're in the short run. And you're not at the natural rate anymore. So we've got two different labor supply curves here. This medium run one that's going to be vertical in our model, and a short run supply curve that's going to have a slope to it. We can get all that out of this model. In fact, the equilibrium here, I can set the W's equal. So the equilibrium, U, would be where those two things are equal. That's this point right here. So that'll be where P0E F of mu and Z0 equals P0 over 1 plus N0. So that's the equilibrium U. And all we want to know for the supply curve is a very simple question. If I change P, holding everything else constant, how does U change? Because that's going to tell me about P and Y. If I know how U changes, I know how N changes, I know how Y changes. Unemployment goes up, output goes down. It's that simple. Unemployment goes down, output goes up. So we know that. So this will allow us to work out fairly simply how P and U or P and Y are related. Once we have the PU relationship, the PY relationship is just the opposite side, whatever that might be. Really? Now, notice something about the medium run. That's when that's true, right? What happens when this is P0 to the prices? They're going to cancel, right? So when this is true, we have P0 F of U and Z0 equals P0 over 1 plus M0. So the P0's cancel, and you're left with F of mu Z0 equals 1 over 1 plus M0. So I know everything in this equation but one thing. This is like x plus 3 equals 4. I solve for x. Okay? I know Z0, I know M0, I know what this function is. Theoretically, it's whatever it is. So I've got one equation, one unknown. I can solve for u here, right? So this is going to give me the natural rate. And if I ask myself, okay, in the medium run, what's the relationship between y and p, or between u and p? Is there any p's in here? No. So at every price level, we'll get the same unemployment or the same output level, right? It doesn't matter what the price level is. Saying it doesn't matter what the price level is the same thing as saying the line is vertical. You get the same value at every price. So this tells us that the natural rate of output, or the medium run aggregate supply curve, I've been calling this a long run aggregate supply curve too, because I just can't help myself. Every other book I've ever used, it's a long run AS. Technically in this book, it's a medium run AS. But it's what you probably learned as a long run aggregate supply curve in 202, I would guess. And so it's just whatever mu n, that gives us yn, right? Once I know mu n, I know what yn is. I can figure that out. We had a formula for that, 1 minus y over, u equals 1 minus y over L. So if you know u, you can solve for y, because the labor force is fixed. But we won't go through that. We'll just realize that every unemployment rate maps into some level of output. Skip all those intermediate steps. So the medium run supply curve is just a vertical line. Now the short run is different, because in the short run these don't cancel, because this is the expected price and they're not necessarily the same. So in the short run we will end up with a price here in the model. So let's look at the short run next. This is all stuff I did last time. I just wanted to kind of go back over it one more time and hope to fix it a little better. Maybe half an hour, sorry if you bored you here. Well, whether you have or not, it might be boring. That's another question. Anyway, so where was I? Yeah, okay, so now we have a model PE 0, some fixed F of mu something we want to find for a fixed Z0 equals P0 over 1 plus M0. So if we fix everything in here, P0, E, P0, M0, Z0, we just have one equation and one unknown again, and that's going to give us a U. So this will give us a mu0, but it's not necessarily the natural rate, because these things aren't necessarily equal. It'll be the natural rate at that one time when those are equal, but it's not necessarily the natural rate. And that'll give us a y0. So what we know at this point is that if I feed this model a P0 and hold everything else constant, it gives me back a y0. So at P0, I get a mu0, which tells me what y0 is out of this model. So we want to just raise the price level to P1 and keeping the expected price fixed. They're not equal. We'll keep this fixed, we'll keep this fixed, we'll keep this fixed. We just want to raise the price level and see what has to happen to mu. Remembering that this is a negative relationship. Well, if this side goes up, it'll be bigger than that side. How do we make this side bigger if it's a negative relationship? By lowering the unemployment rate. So when the price goes up, we have to lower the unemployment rate to keep this equal. When price goes up, we have to raise output to keep this equal. Okay? So that tells us it's going to be Y1 and P1. So when P0 goes up to P1, all else equal, we need the unemployment rate to go down or output to go up to maintain equality. Maintain equality. Or what we really mean is equilibrium. That's the equilibrium in that market, in the labor market. That's the labor market equilibrium. We want to make sure, what's the new equilibrium? It's the U that makes this equal again. So we know that the aggregate supply curve for a fixed expectation, a fixed Z, and a fixed M0 looks like that. And that's the short run supply curve. It's no longer vertical.
Sorry.
Right, okay.
So I'm just for like mistakes. That's a new like equal or U?
I've been writing as mu and saying mu.
Okay.
It's probably a U in the book. I don't know for sure.
Is it
But
okay?
I'm going to say both.
Okay.
So U equals mu equals that to me.
Right.
So whatever we call this funny hoop thing, it's the unemployment.
Okay. Right.
Hmm?
With that said, to maintain equality.
Or equilibrium. That's a really bad abbreviation of equilibrium. EQUIL. Really bad abbreviation itself is. One of those it is. So there's a supply curve. So what we have now is a medium run and a short run, whose position depends upon these variables. And since this is a natural rate, if I mean by this that PE0 equals P0, this has to be P0 because we're at the natural rate when expectations are correct. So at that one point where the expectations are correct, we're on the long, medium run supply curve. For any other price, we move away from it, as long as these are fixed. So we actually have a whole family of short run supply curves depending upon the values of these things. Maybe we'll show. Pretty simple. When prices go up with costs fixed, profits go up, and so firms expand their production. As they do, marginal costs go up, so they expand their production, and so the price goes up, and that's a profits go up, that's a signal to expand. That's basically. If PE were to go up, that's what your wages are. Wages would have been higher, so costs are higher. So when price goes up and PE goes up to match, wages go up, and you don't get any change in profit. Because both your costs and what you're getting for your product are going up. So when this thing goes up, you can think of that as wages going up. So remember, the wage setting equation is W's PE times F. And so when this goes up, you can think, okay, costs are higher. And so in that case, when both P and PE go up the same, you don't get any change in profit, so you don't get any change in output. When P goes up with cost fixed, that's different. Then profit does rise, and so you see an expansion in output. That's the underlying story here. It's a pretty simple story. So then to finish this off, sort of how the model, all we need to know now is how does the short run supply curve shift if one of these three things change? So you remember how you do that? You want to drive a curve, you just work out the relationship. So you go to, in this case, the wage setting, price setting model, and see how when we drive this, we just took the graph. So we're going to take this graph again, P0 over 1 plus M0. P0E times F of U, I don't know, NZ, 0, and that gives us an unemployment rate, U0. So what you want to do when you're looking at how a curve shifts is just, you've already derived it, so just write it down. This axis is wage, by the way. We want to know how y and p, we want to know how the curve shifts. So this is the short run AS we've already derived for PE0, Z0, and M0. And we're at this point, these axes don't line up, so there's no reason to make them be the same. They're just side by side because it's convenient. There's nothing to match. So at P0, we're at Y0. So all we need to do is hold price constant. We'll just hold price constant. Change one of these things and see what happens to output. If it goes down, it shifts in. If it goes up, it shifts out. So for instance, for P0E, when that goes up, what happens? Here's P1E F of U and Z0. Nothing else has changed except the expectation goes up. Well, that gives you a higher level of unemployment, right? So unemployment goes up, so output must go down. And the price is still P0. So at the same price, it shifted in. So it must be, here's Y1 corresponding to U1. So it must be that the curve shifted in. In fact, we could say more than that. If this means PE, what I mean by this is it equals P0. So PE0 means the expectation is P0. It's just a shorthand way of writing it. So I mean by this, PE equals P0. The expectation is P0. So we know when the expectation is correct, you're at the natural rate. So that must be the natural rate. If by this I mean the expectation is P1, and I do, this must be P1, because we're at the natural rate. What's the vertical line? Here?
Yeah.
That's the medium run. So that's the natural rate. This is not. Here, price and you expect P1, but you get P0. So at this point here, you're not at the long run, supply, the medium run supply curve, because you're expecting P0 and the actual price is lower. So we expected the actual the same.
Typically, why does unemployment increase when expected price increases? Is that like some bargaining power?
Because at the same price, your costs go up, but you're not selling your goods for more.
So you fire people?
You have to fire people to bring your costs back down. Yes. So basically, when PE goes up, you think there's W going up, so costs are going up, but we're holding the price constant. And so profits are going to go down, and so you're going to contract. You can also think of it another way if you want to. If W goes up, price fixed, W over P goes up, so the real wage goes up. The higher real wage, firms use less labor. If we're holding price constant, this means W goes up. If we were to look at this model. In this model, W stays fixed. But what matters is not the wage, but W over P. So you can think of it as cost. So is it clear how to do M0 and Z0, what you do? You take this model, do what? Hold the price constant, change M or Z, see what happens to you, and then just see which way the curve shifts. So you do the same thing I just did, but you change Z or M instead of P. Got this? Before I go on to something else, is there anything you want me to go back over? I have a tendency to go too fast. This is your chance. So good. Okay. So this is our model of supply. All this family of short run supply curves. This P0E is going to be a main thing that shifts it around. So let's do aggregate demand now. What book am I using? What symbols do they use? So we have, sorry, we gotta figure out. Oh yeah, we've got that weird Y, L of I thing. Okay, yes. All right, so we built an IS curve based upon Y. You can see Y minus T plus I, and I and Y plus G. That was our IS curve. And we also built a money demand curve, which is of the form M over P equals Y L of I. So this was real money supply, this is real money demand. Money supply equals money demand. Output goes up, we need more money. Interest rate goes up, we hold less because the opportunity cost of holding money is higher. So what we want to do is very simple. We want to know how P and Y in this model are related. How are P and Y related? So we'll just take the IS and LM curves and work it out. So we're after the relationship between P and Y. So we're going to use the IS-LM model. IS-LM M0 over P0. I don't care what the interest rate is so much right now, so I'm not going to keep track of it. But we know if we start here, we know if the price is P0, we get a Y0 from the IS-LM model. So IS-LM is the demand side of the economy. Cold coffee. Summer day. So what do we want to do? Change the price. Let's lower the price to P1. Just for fun, we can raise it, doesn't make any difference. We'll see the relationship either way. Let's lower it to P1. If P1 goes down, what happens to M over P? If M is fixed and P goes down, M over P goes up. So the LM curve shifts out. In. M over that. Did you say up? Down. Right. Okay. Yeah. I said that. One of us was confused. I'm not sure who it was at this point. But anyway, when P goes up, M fixed. M over P goes down, the L curve shifts in. So it'll shift. Oh, gosh. I see what's wrong. I was raising the price instead of lowering it. No wonder I confused myself. Okay, starting all over again. All right. if the price goes down, M over P goes up. So y'all were right to begin with. I always thought I got confused. So P goes down, M over P goes up. And that makes the L curve shift out. Y'all had it right. So this shifts out at a lower price level, LM, and P1. I'll get the Y1, Y1. So at a lower price, you get a higher level output. So that's the relationship between price and output on the demand side of the economy. And it's an easy story. When price goes up, M over P goes down. So M over P, that's supply, is less than Y L of I, that's demand, money supply, money demand. So what happens to the price of money? It goes down. Well, I did it again. Should I just do, this is the, we're going this way. I want to tell the same story. I'm sorry. I used to hate derivatives. I used to take my notes and take. Down, up, switch the inequality, and the interest rate falls. If the money supply is greater than money. Either story is right. If the interest rate goes down, what happens in this model? Investment goes up, so output goes up. So we see the negative relationship between prices and output. A couple more things and we'll have our model built. We won't have to do this kind of stuff anymore. So bear with me a little longer than this. I just want to look at shifts in the aggregate demand curve. What makes it shift in or out? So again, when we're looking for shifts, we just pretend like it's already built. So we've already built the aggregate demand curve. IS, and let me just look at some things that we're going to worry about. The main things we'll worry about here are government spending, taxes, and money. There's other things that shift these curves around, but those are the main things we're going to worry about. So our starting point here is Y0 and P0. And this is an aggregate demand curve for G0, T0, and M0. If any of those things change, that aggregate demand curve is going to move around. And I should probably emphasize, since it's important, that this is a horizontal line instead of a line. It's got a good slope to it. So let's do government spending up or taxes falling or anything else that shifts the IS. So I'm just going to use government spending as an example of something that shifts the IS, but they all work exactly the same. So let me just focus on this one. So suppose government spending goes up at IS G1 T0. Have it change the price. Y1, Y1. So at the same price, output is higher. Government spending goes up, aggregate demand goes up, blah, blah, blah. So the aggregate demand curve shifts out. So anything that shifts the IS curve to the right causes the aggregate demand curve to shift out. Um, Basically, the experiment here is to hold P constant. Let G go up or T go down or anything else and see what happens to Y. That tells us, in this case, it went up. All that's going on in the background is that when government spending goes up, aggregate demand goes up. So aggregate demand greater than income. Inventories fall, the output goes like that. So we hold price constant, let government spending go up. Or taxes go down, or autonomous investment go up, or autonomous consumption go up. Anything that shifts the IS curve out has exactly the same effect. The aggregate demand. So what do we do with M? The other one we need to do. So we'll increase M, we'll hold price constant, and see what happens to Y. Can you just see it already? So let's do another one. So now we're doing shifts in the element group. So if M goes up, what happens up here? Shifts out to LM M1 over P0. So output goes up. And we notice that the price is unchanged. Therefore, we must be on that point. So the aggregate demand curve shifted out. M up with P constant, so M over P goes up. So money supply, we've done this one, greater than money demand, so the interest rate falls and output goes up. Just We did it with price going down, but it's the same intuition. Oh, yeah. There's investment going up in there. Yep. Sorry, I'll start to annoy you. I would have taken that idea. I didn't fit it at all. That's the shepherd. I gave up turkey legs. Sorry. They didn't look at me. All right. Yay, it's built. Now we're just going to play around with the model a little bit. Equilibrium in the short run and medium run. Medium run. So it's possible, so let's look at the short run equilibrium first. So now we have a model where we have a medium run aggregate supply curve at yn. We have a short run AS that depends upon PE, Z, and M. And we have an aggregate demand curve. It depends upon G0, T0, and M0. This is a little m, markup. This is a big M, money. Hopefully I can keep those separate. My writing's not the best writing. So in the short run, this would be P0 right here, by the way. That's PE0, this is P0. I want it. So here's output. That's just a short run equilibrium. Because the actual price level, PSR, this is P0. The price of the expected price is P0. We know that because that's where we're on the natural rate. So this point here is P0. So the expected price and the actual price are not the same. And that's why we're not at the natural rate. Price here is too high relative to the one we're doing. So this economy would be overheated, right? Because output is above the natural rate, the potential level of output. Now we talked about how, I think we did talk about how you can be above potential. Does that make sense? If you've got this potential and somehow you exceed it. By potential output, just to make sure we understand this point, we mean the long run sustainable level of output. So it's only the level of activity that you can sustain day after day after day after day after day. So just like you could push yourself when a test is coming up and only sleep 2 or 3 hours for a couple of days, maybe during finals week, you can get your short run output above your long run natural rate, above your sustainable long run rate. But it's going to be costly. At some point, something's going to give. You can do the same thing. You can take your factories which you'd normally shut down for maintenance each day, to grease things and that sort of thing. You sort of run your crews day and night, run your trucks day and night, and sort of give up on maintenance for a little while. If you do that too long, it's gonna start to be really costly. The equivalent of losing sleep and just, you know. And so you just can't sustain a lecture. That level of output. You could also have an equilibrium. If man was down here where you're below the natural rate. Kind of like when there's no tests around and I get 20 people showing up out of an 80 people class. I think we're down here somewhere in these days. We're not at a sustainable level. And so you can be on either side of the natural rate. And in the short run, we can get stuck in either position. So this is a short run equilibrium. And you could also be down here. It's just as easy, not just as easy, but you could also have the other equilibrium. You might have called that, some books use terms like inflationary gap for this. So you might have called that an inflationary gap in your 202 class, depending on that bomb. It depends on which book you have, exactly what they give that. But you could also have the opposite situation where we have, say, YN, short run AS, or medium run AS. In this case, maybe demand is too low. And you get stuck in a recessionary gap. So you can get stuck in either situation for a period of time. But in the long run, we think there's some mechanism, something changes that gets us back to the natural rate of output in the long run. So the next thing we need to figure out is, okay, what's the mechanism in each case that causes us to return to the long run equilibrium? We'd also like to know something else. How fast does it operate? If we're in this inflationary gap, how fast do we get back to full employment? If it happens in a month, we probably don't need policymakers to step in and do anything. The problem's going to take care of itself. And maybe by the time they step in, it's, you know, things have already happened, it's too late. So if this adjustment's really fast, you may not have any role for policy at all. We actually think these adjustments are relatively fast. You may want to avoid prices going up, because what's going to happen is the short supply curve is going to shift back. You might want to avoid the increase in prices somehow by bringing demand down, by cutting government spending, raising taxes, cutting down, something like that. But we think these kinds of gaps are relatively quick to fix themselves. So it's not necessarily the case that policy is required at all. That's not to say that policy can't still do something useful. These kinds of equilibrium, this is where we are right now. These are much, much harder, it seems like, to get out of. For some reason, we seem to get stuck sometimes in these below full employment equilibrium. And in that case, you may, you know, if it takes you 7 years to get out of that kind of recession. I write for CBS Nightwatch, and beginning of the recession, it's like 2007, 2008, and I wrote an article for them saying the economy is not going to fully recover until 2013. And my editor said, "Are you really serious? You're going to say this is going to be 6 years to get back to full employment? Come on, that can't be right." And it turns out I was like optimistic. So we've been in this thing for a long, 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 long time, and very, very slowly seem to be crawling our way back to full employment. So why do we crawl here and seem to jump here? What's the difference in these two scenarios? Well, in this case, wages have to go up. This is one possible story. Wages seem to rise really easily. And so the adjustment mechanism here is wages have to rise. What's happening here is you're overusing your resources. Resources are in excess demand because the economy is overheated. There's not enough people, there's not enough stuff around, you're beyond your long-run potential. That's going to cause wages and other input costs to go up. People are fighting over raw materials and trying to outbid each other. There's not enough engineers, so you have to steal one from another firm, and that drives your costs up because you gotta bid them away. So when you're at full employment, you have to bid resources away, and that tends to drive wages up. As wages go up, the short the supply curve will shift back. We'll write this all down. In this case, wages have to fall. And for the efficiency wage reasons we talked about for one, or just because of psychological resistance, people just don't like to have their wages cut. And so wages don't seem to fall very fast in recessions. There seems to be wage rigidity, downward wage rigidity, sluggish to adjust. We've seen it kind of come down. It's been mainly because when people are hired, they've been hired at a lower rate. We haven't seen very many wages during the recession cut for existing workforces. So what they've done is sort of let people go and then they've hired them back at a slightly lower rate. Even that's hard because you get disparities between your new workers and your old workers that tend to cause morale to go bad. So it's really hard to even do that in a lot of firms. But that seems to be one of the reasons why this supply curve doesn't want to change, is because we've got this resistance to wages falling. So you tend to see this not curing itself very fast at all, whereas there's no problem if you want to raise my wages, sure, I'm up for that. Right? So, yeah. What am I supposed to be talking about? Let me look at the notes. Let's see what I'm okay, yeah, so now we need to take a break. Yes, right here.
是吗？你要去洗的这是？
行，我这 P 一个作业一年开一次，说大概比赛产品设计，但是很水，比较好看。我觉得这次作业好难，也不是好难，我只写了1个小时，1个小时很难搞定。不是太坑了，上面004的录像，你想这个关键是应该都走，对，然后上来一段，而且的人太少了，那时候不想录像，我应该知道改变。
All right, let's get it over with. I don't think I'm gonna make it to the end, so the sooner we start, the sooner we'll finish. The wishes might come along. So now we want to look at the dynamics of adjustment. You've probably seen how these models work before, but we're gonna do it anyway, because that's how we are. So here we go. So this is from the short run to the medium run. So how do we get back to the long run, the medium run? How do we get back to the natural rate of output if we're not at it? So let's take the overheated case first. So YP, medium run, and I want the equilibrium over here. So let's put a short run AS, PE0, M0, Z0, and our friend the aggregate demand curve, G0. Maybe I'll make it to the end. You got a better chance of not making it this early. So in this case, Y equilibrium in the short run is greater than the medium run natural rate value.
So what's going to happen? Well, one thing we can see right away, this is P0 here. The actual price in the short run is above the expected price. So what do you think people would do in that case? They're going to revise their expectations. So what we would expect here is that the expected price level goes up. You can think of it a couple of ways. One reason it might go up is that you know the economy is overheated, so you know wages are going to go up. So firms are going to have to raise their prices to cover the higher costs. And so when the economy is overheated, so when it's overheated, you expect input costs to go up. Things like wages. We have in the model the price of oil, price of steel, price of glue, whatever you use in your production. Everyone's going to be trying to get it. You're above full employment, and so there's no idle resources lying around to just use in your firm. When you need people, you got to bid them away from other firms. If you want more oil, you've got to bid more than the store next to you is getting the oil needed. And so that's going to push up the price of inputs. So if costs go up, firms must increase price to cover costs going up. So that leads to the expected price going up. So as long as Y is greater than YN, we expect to see price expectations rising. Mechanically, you can do it just because the actual price, this would be P0, what they're expecting. That's the expected price. The price is greater, so you're going to revise your expectations. You can also figure it out. So this short run supply curve will start shifting back. The E0 prime. Output's still above the natural rate. It'll just keep shifting until we finally get back to, say, PE1, PE1, Z0, M0. Where this would be P1. So your price expectations rise. You finally hit the point where they finally equal the actual price, P1, and you're back at your long-run equilibrium. So there's a natural mechanism here, we think, driving back to the natural rate. Oops. So if we were looking at GDP over time, in our model, we don't have any growth, so the natural rate is constant here. Basically, output, in this case, goes above the natural rate for some reason, and then there's a reason for it to come back. And so you can see a spike up as you move out to this point, and then it would slowly move back down. Now we're going to look at the other case, a recession, and how you come back. So what you see in the data are all these waves of the economy sort of waving around the natural rate. This is an example of how you return from above. Yeah, so that's like any of these cases. Now we're going to look at the other case where we're below the natural rate and see how you adjust it. So now we're going to have an underheated economy, or a recessionary economy, an economy in recession, and see what happens in that case. It's just the opposite. We have output, natural rate, medium run, AS. short run, oops, I want to make that up a little higher. Short run AS PE0, Z0, little m0, some demand curve A, B, G0, T0, M0. Now, if we didn't want to wait for this to happen automatically, we could change policy. Try to move the demand, we could move the demand curve to that point, we'd be all done. But we'll come to those things later. So in this case, the short run, here's PSR Y. The expected price is up here. P0 would be above PSR in this case. So the actual price is lower than the expected one. YSR, short run. So in this case, Y is less than YN. So here we're going to think, okay, Y is less than YN, short run. So there are unemployed resources. And that will cause costs to go down. Things like the price of oil, the price of steel, that sort of thing ought to fall because no one's even using what's available in a recession. You're below full utilization of your resources. So there's idle stuff laying around. You don't have to bend away from anyone. And so in this case, we expect costs to go down. And so you expect price to go down as PE goes down. Now, if you're only, wages are 70% of costs in firms. So if wages are sticky downward, you may not expect much here. Okay. But let's just not worry about that right now. So price expectations fall because there's unemployed resources. We're expecting prices to fall. As that happens, the supply curve starts shifting in until you get to a new short run AS PE1, Z0, M0, where this point here would be P1. That's where your expectations are correct. So in this case, we expect the supply curve to move in that direction. And again, how fast that supply curve moves is going to depend upon how fast we expect costs to fall. And if wages are sticky, you cannot expect much there at all. Again, we'll come to that later. All right, cool. So 3 more things to do today. And that'll end this chapter. I didn't want to start a new chapter today. So I don't know how long it will take us to do these 3 things. But I got 3 more things to do. The effects of a monetary expansion, the effects of a change in the deficit, G or T. So M, G, and T, those are demand shocks. And we also want to look at supply shocks. And we'll use a change in the price of oil, because that seems to be one of the great big supply shocks. So first we're going to shock the demand side of the economy with monetary or fiscal policy. Then we'll shock the supply side of the economy with a change in the price of oil. And our goal is to see what's the short run and long run consequences of them. So let's look at the effects of a monetary expansion. So the short run and medium run effects of a monetary expansion. I don't know if we'll finish it. So, let's start at the long run equilibrium. So, A, B, G0, T0, M0, that's the thing we want to shock, is M. Expectations are initially correct, PE0, Z0, M0. This is actually P0. So we're at the long run equilibrium. But for whatever reason, the Fed isn't happy with that. They want to increase output. So they increase the money supply. So M goes up. When that happens, you get the A, B, G0, T0, and M1. So in the short run, output would rise like that. It's because our expectations are fixed. We let these expectations adjust immediately. And later, we'll argue that they might. Because if this were a fully anticipated increase in the money supply, people might say, oh, the Fed's increasing the money supply, that's going to cause prices to go up. I learned that in college. And so they change their expectations immediately. But here we're holding price expectations fixed for the moment. That may not be the right thing to do, but for now we're doing it. So this is an unexpected increase in M. We're actually looking at here as an unexpected increase in M. Because if it's expected, PE might change. So the Fed wanted to increase output. But unlike now, when they try to telegraph everything, they didn't tell anyone. One morning, the money supply just simply went up. Surprise. Oh, so we're here. Economy is overheated. And what happens in the longer run? Yeah, this short run supply curve begins to shift back as PE goes up. And so eventually, we'll get here to P1, this new short run AS. P1, C0, M0. So this is final gap. Is the medium run. And this is the short run. So again, you can think of this over time as we're at the natural rate here at Yn. Suddenly there's a monetary spike, and then we slowly return back to full employment. So what we see here is that in the short run, M is effective. M is, we say, non-neutral. When money's neutral, it can't affect real output, it can't affect unemployment, it can't affect any real variables. And so in the short run, money's non-neutral because it can't affect output. Yes?
And in the short run, is it M1?
Yes. So in the short run, we move here. So M goes up, we go from A to B.
But then when it adjusts it, then M1 goes up like at the top.
M1 stays the same.
So for the short run there.
Here,
Yeah.
M1 is still M1. We're on this anchor. What changes is PE.
But don't you put M1 on that one too, or not?
No. This is markup.
Correct.
This is the little m. This is the big M.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I see it. Yeah, no, those are different things. That's it. And the other side would work the opposite. You can see how it would work on the other direction. So, all right. Yeah, let's, can I erase this graph? Anyone? Now let's make it harder. Because that was too easy. That's not the reason. Now let's add the ISLM curve so we can better understand what's going on behind the scenes, what's the intuition. So I'm going to stack two graphs here. The one we just did, we're going to do that all over again. So this is Y and P up here. And down here, we're going to have the ISLM model. We're going to manipulate it simultaneously. Because that's how we roll out. So we're going to start off with a long-run equilibrium at Yn, medium-run supply or misses. Aggregate demand, short-run AS. Oh, what am I doing? That was dumb. We'll just relabel and we'll be fine. IS, LM, M0 over P0. This is G, well, but I'm not going to use those, so we'll just won't bother. Yn. So aggregate demand of M0 and short run AS of P. I'm going to suppress all the things we don't need, so that I don't have to write all those things every time. So Z0 is still there, little M0 is still there, all that stuff's T0, G0, they're all still there. I just going to drop them for notational convenience. So now, we'll just do it all over again, because we want to. The way to do this is to first shift the LM curve down here. So shift the LM curve first. LM of M1 over P0. Now what I want you to do, this is not an equilibrium point, this is just a how do I graph this correctly point. I want you to, P is at P0, I want you to take this point right here and just come up to here and just find that point right there. Because that's going to tell you where the aggregate demand curve shifts. It's not the new short run equilibrium, that's something else. But this is the horizontal shift in the aggregate demand curve. So the aggregate demand curve shifts to AD of M1. Our new equilibrium is right there. This, because this is P0, price hasn't changed. So this is the output you would get if price was at P0. Price doesn't stay at P0. That tells you how to shift the curve. You see that? Now the price goes up to P1. So where we actually end up is right here at YSR. There's YSR. And find this point on the IS curve right here. The book does this too, so this is at least one other professionally done. I think their drawings aren't quite right, but I'll explain them. I don't think they got this shit exactly right. It's a little bit off mine. Anyway, let me, page 175. If I'm mumbling, I'm not saying anything you need to hear. You didn't need to hear that. So what happens is the LM curve also shifts. Call this point right here PSR, that slightly higher price. So the LM curve shifts back to LM of M1 over PSR. So this is our short run equilibrium here.
Back.
Yes, because the price went up from P0 to PSR. So relative to M1 over P0, M1 over PSR is smaller, because PSR is bigger than P0, as you can see. So This LM curve was just to help us draw the thing. This is where you end up. So this was just an A to help us get the equilibrium right. This is decomposing into an M effect, which shifts this out to here, and then a P effect, which brings us back to here. This is the short run equilibrium. Everyone's dressing in pink these days for obvious reasons, so we can honor that too. Now what happens in the longer run? So in the short run, money's effective, and we see that price goes up. What happens to the interest rate? I0, ISR. Interest rate goes down, output goes up, so unemployment goes down. So we can get anything else here? IPY, that's enough. So in the short run, that's what happens. Money's effective. We can affect output and unemployment. We can affect real variables, so it's non-neutral. Now in the long run, what happens? So in the long run, well, the economy's overheated, right? Right. Yeah, it is. Yes. So in the long run, the short run supply curve will do what? It'll shift back until it eventually gets to SRAS PE1, where this is P1. So we went like this, and that was the short run. Now what's happened to the LM curve? As the price goes up, what's the LM curve do? It shifts back. So our new LM curve, M1 over P1. It must be that M1 over P1 equals M0 over P0. What happens is prices keep going up until real money supply is where it was before. So in the long run, lots of people with their head down writing, so I'm just going to let it stall here for a second. In the long run, then, what do we know? Two, output is unchanged. Interest rate is unchanged. P goes up, but M over P is unchanged. Notice that all the real variables, real output, unemployment, real money, nothing real changes. That's what we mean by neutral. So in this case, money is neutral. We have monetary neutrality in the medium run, non-neutrality in the short run. So monetary policy is effective in the short run, ineffective in the long run. So if this adjustment is really fast, if this only takes, like you increase the money supply, the next week this thing's just back, you can't really do much with monetary policy. It's not going to really be very effective at shifting output for very long. So your effectiveness of your policy, what you can do is going to depend critically upon how fast those curves adjust. So again, we'll come back to those questions later. Right now, we're just mechanically working it all out. Yes, sir.
What happened to the interest rate?
It's unchanged in the long run because we end up right here. So in the medium run, we end up right at this. That's what I tried to show here. But this is also the orange line. Let's do exactly the same thing for fiscal policy. So let's look at deficit up, G up, or T down. And I'll just use this one as my example. Just, I don't know why, because it's, you don't have to negate it. in your head. So same exact exercise, but, and let me do it in one step this time. You're sophisticated people, right? We can do this all in one. We could do ABS first and then tack this on. Let's just try to do it all at once. It's the same exact thing we just did, pretty much. So we'll have, again, our medium run supply curve, AD, and I'll just look at government spending, and we could use T0 here too. This time we're looking at fiscal policy rather than monetary. Short run AS, PE0, and we're going to start at equilibrium. So the expectations are correct. Here's my N. Now we just have to somehow hit the right points here. IS and G0. LM of M over E. So, we want to increase government spending, increase taxes. We want to shift the IS. Last time we shifted the IS. And see what happens. So let's do that. What do we use first? Yellow. So government spending goes up to ISG1. Again, what you want to do, that's not the equilibrium yet, because we're going to get a price change. Come here and find this cross point right here. And that's where your demand curve is going to shift to. Because price hasn't changed. So the aggregate demand curve shifts out to AD G1. Then the price goes up a little bit, and we end up here at this short run price, P short run. And then drop this down. That's the short run output right there. And that tells you where the LM curve hits the new IS curve. You can hit it right there. So, the demand curve shifts out, then we move up to this point, and the price goes up a little bit. When the price goes up a little bit, the LM curve shifts back. So the LM curve we get is LM of M over P in the short run. So this is our initial interest rate. And this is I. That's all. So one, I'm not really talk about neutrality of government spending, that's a monetary thing. We can certainly look at what happens. In the short run, price goes up, interest rate goes up, and output goes up. So we would expect prediction of this model that we would take to the data and see if it were true, is that government spending has those effects. We probably wouldn't be using this model if it didn't actually agree with the data. This is a theoretical prediction that you would then use your econometric skills to test. What's going to happen in the longer run? The economy is overheated. That drives price expectations up. And both the LM and the short-run aggregate supply curve will begin shifting back, just like they did here. I could have taken a bunch of these things. As I shifted back, we could have set up an LM curve. Might have been better to draw this equivalently, so that these sort of shift back with that. Because they shift back together as the price goes up. They both shift. So the same thing is going to happen here. In the long run, I'll use the other color, right? Oops. This thing starts shifting back until we get to the short run AS of PE1. So that's P1 at this point. And where we're going to hit the LM, the IS curve is right there at that point. So the LM curve also begins shifting back. As price goes up, and this shifts, the LM curve shifts back as M over P falls, and you eventually get to LM of M0 of M over P1. So we can take this model and say, okay, what happens in the long run? So in the long run, what we see is what? What happened to output? Price goes up more. The interest rate, we end up with I1. I goes up more. The output is unchanged. Unemployment too. So again, we have this effect that in the long run, you can't really impact the output. So in the long run, monetary policy has no effect on output at all. Fiscal policy, same thing. In the long run, that's no effect. Sorry, I was thinking ahead. I'm trying to talk. I should have tried to think about one thing to talk about another. It wasn't working. So anyway, so in the long run, just like with monetary policy, you get no effect on output. Unlike with monetary policy, though, interest rate changes. And what happened to M over P? Here, M over P went what? From here to here, what happened to M over P? Goes down. This is, M is fixed. So when P goes up, M over P goes down. So M over P goes down even more. Let me do one more thing with respect to this. Oh, you're probably still running. So up until 2007, I don't think it's a bad model at all to say AD is 0, that, I mean, AD, G0, T0, M0. Short run, AS. So let's just, I'm not going to do anything with that, it's the expectation. So we're sitting here at P0. Now, we really ought to put this model in motion, let it sort of grow over time. We sort of grow in this direction at the equilibrium, so we have this general inflation. But let's just take a snapshot of the point in time. So this is, say, before 2007. We might have even been a little bit overheated in the economy at that time. Maybe even slightly above our long-run sustainable rate. Then what happens? So in the summer of 2007, we start seeing financial markets get the jitters, and then suddenly the economy goes into recession, in part because everyone gets afraid because they're losing all this money in the housing market, losing all this money in their retirement savings, all this stuff's happening. So investment plummets, consumption plummets. So we see all the autonomous spending in the economy just plummet as a consequence of the crash of financial markets and housing markets. So what we saw was a big shift down in the aggregate demand curve. You might say autonomous 0, and this is AD of G0, T0, M0, and autonomous 1. So autonomous spending just took a nosedive as a consequence of the recession. Now, according to our model, what ought to happen next is we can just sit back and just wait a little while, and price expectations would fall. We'd see the short-run supply curve shifting back, and in very short order, we'd be back at the long-run level of output, all would be rosy, and you wouldn't have to worry about getting jobs. That's not what happened, right? So we got stuck in this point, in the short-run equilibrium with unemployment at 10%, because output's so low, nearly 10, didn't quite get 10. And we're just stuck there. And so one thing you can do is wait for that automatic adjustment that we've been talking about. We've seen a little bit of it. It's probably the case that this has shifted some. But the other thing you can do is what? You can shift the demand curve around through monetary and fiscal policy. The problem is they use monetary policy, and that probably had some impact. Then they hit the zero bound. They couldn't lower interest rates anymore, so monetary policy sort of lost its effectiveness at that point. Now maybe you can do a little bit more, maybe you may use quantitative easing to push that up some more, but you're still stuck below full employment. So what you really need, if monetary policy loses its oomph, as it did, get that note, so you need something else. You can still wait. In the long run, we're all dead. That's what Keynes was saying. Yeah, we could wait 10 years for this to fix itself, but gosh, why wait from 2007 to 2013 when we have these policy tools? Well, in my view, the Fed did its job. But what did fiscal policymakers do? They did this little stimulus package. Then they started austerity and just brought it right back. I mean, you don't want to move the demand curve in this direction when you're in the recession. That's exactly what all the austerity measures do. And what austerity was supposed to do was you increase government spending and confidence was going to go way, 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 way up. So here was the theory during the recession, and it was just the wrong thing to do in my opinion. They said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to have all these, we're going to use the debt ceiling and other things to force these cuts in spending. People will look to the long run and they'll be so happy that our long run budget problem has been helped. Their confidence will go up and we'll see more autonomous consumption and more autonomous investment. And so, yeah, we'll get a little negative impact from government spending going down, but not from taxes going up, can't do that. But we'll cut government spending. But autonomous spending, people will be so happy about the long run debt that confidence will go up so much, and investment will boom, consumption will boom, and the demand curve will come right. Well, that's just not what happened. That confidence boom never happened. So they got the austerity part. The confidence boom that was supposed to come in investment and consumption just wasn't there. And then we're just stuck. And this is what the Fed keeps saying. We need your help. You know, you read the last FOMC statement, and it says because fiscal policy is so screwed up, it doesn't say it quite that way. We're going to have to be maintaining this accommodative policy, but boy, we need help from you people. We need you to do more than cut the deficit in a recession, because that's just exactly the wrong thing to do. We need you to spend more in the short run to bring the economy back to the place. So this model will sort of justify that. But we'll talk later what might go wrong with that type of policy intervention, why there's a group of people that are so opposed to that kind of policy intervention, and those sorts of questions. But mechanically in our model, it's pretty clear what the policy prescription ought to be. And this explains just a whole lot of what you heard out there in the news. So we finally have a model we can use to sort of say things about the world. Anyway, I just got an email, a couple of them. No, am I not? Let's start.